Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the art table again today. The last month or so has been a very interesting time for people in the independent publishing arena, particularly those who are looking to use crowdfunding to reach their publishing goals. We watched as Brandon Sanderson rolled out his new secret project Kickstarter, which offered backers what was essentially an opportunity to subscribe to a year-long publishing contract that would get them 4 novels over the course of the year 2023. That campaign wrapped up about a week ago as of this recording and netted Sanderson over $40 million. Sanderson used a number of very interesting and clever promotional tactics over the course of his Kickstarter, including a number of promotion streams where he gave audiences a chance to hear his basic creative process and thoughts about upcoming stories that they would get from the Kickstarter. There were question and answer live streams, and at the end of the campaign, he suddenly dropped the prologue to his next book in the Stormlight Archives, which is his most anticipated book coming from traditional publishing. I've already discussed how I think Brandon Sanderson has done a number of interesting and very productive things for the independent publishing movement by running this Kickstarter. What I think is very interesting is that right after that Kickstarter ended, we had another interesting discussion occur between 2 people who are working as independent comic creators. Those creators are ya boy Zach, or Richard C. Meyer, the mastermind of Splato Comics, and Douglas Ernst, who is the writer of Soulfinder and who works with Iconic Comics as his publisher and distributor. If you're not familiar with either of these people, what you really need to know about them for the purposes of this discussion is that both of them have been longtime commenters on both mainstream and independent comics, and both have previously criticized people who ran comic crowdfunders and failed to fulfill them in a timely fashion or failed to fulfill them at all. Richard Meyer has run a very large number of crowdfunding campaigns through his label Splato Comics, and he has fulfilled most of them in a timely fashion or a near-timely fashion, by which I mean within 1 or 2 months of the time he originally promised to fulfill them. Meyer does have a number of comic projects outstanding. I believe it's 2 or 3 right now. Some as a result of him doing experimental things with his crowdfunding process, and some because of difficulties on the back end in managing all the cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. I myself have backed a total of 3 books from Meyer, and they have all delivered within 3 months of their promised buy date, and 2 of them within 1 month of their promised buy date, which is a very good track record, all things considered. In contrast, Douglas Ernst has written a total of 2 books, the aforementioned Soulfinder titles. He only crowdfunded 1 of them, which I should note he did deliver on time. The other, he simply began selling directly through the Iconic Comics storefront. Doug emphasizes that his product comes in reliably, on time, with good production values, and good storytelling. I bought and own both Soulfinder volumes, and I agree with Doug's assessment of his own work. It's a good story with good production values that delivers on time. You might say that's the bare minimum for a comic book production, but you would be surprised how very hard it is to get even that much out of comics publishing in America these days. So what exactly was the discussion between these 2 about? Well, to be perfectly honest, I haven't dug too deep into the rich backlore of the exchange. As I've said before, I'm really not interested in the drama that can underlie these kinds of dust-ups. There are a lot of independent comic publishers who I don't follow anymore because that seemed to be their primary stock in trade. But I do know, with all the difficulties and uncertainties that come in the crowdfunding world, especially when you stack them with the pandemic uncertainty of the last couple of years, and you have fertile ground for another discussion on the importance of good customer service and punctuality in delivering a product. What was interesting was when ya boy asked what an independent comic publisher could offer if all other publishers were delivering their product promptly and on time. What other selling points would you have? Now, Doug's answer was that he would have a great story well told with good art and great production values. And I agree with that overall assessment. Those are very, very important to have. And for audiences that haven't had that for a long time, just getting those basic things down is a big step in the right direction. For the record, I am of the opinion that everything else I'm about to discuss from here on out are things that should go hand in hand with those basic customer service values. I admire what Doug has done and the entire Iconic Comics crew, who has done a lot of work making sure that they get their books out on time and their customers can rely on the promises they make. Doug's decision to forego crowdfunding for the second Soul Finder book was a very bold decision given the current trends in independent comic publishing. That said, I don't think crowdfunding is going to go away anytime soon in independent comics or in any other sphere. And so it is an interesting question and an important question to ask: what are the unique advantages of crowdfunding as a way to facilitate publishing, and how can creators best leverage those unique opportunities? And this is where the Sanderson campaign comes back into play. Again, obviously Brandon Sanderson was already a famous, well-known, and well-respected publisher before he ran his surprise campaign. Not every independent publisher can duplicate his success in the same way. But he did show that making big, long-term promises is something you can do via crowdfunding, and that will get a response from an invested public, particularly if you give them a lot of windows into what you are planning to do and why you have chosen to do it. It makes the people who are funding your project feel more like they are part of the team that the creator is bouncing ideas off of, and less like they are just customers walking through a shop and pulling things off of the shelf. These kind of crowdfunds also create an opportunity for a lot of rolling hype. Now, I am not a primarily hype-driven story consumer, but I do know that in the attention economy, building hype around your product is very important to keep it in the public mind. A long crowdfunding period, followed by a reasonable fulfillment time, during which you not only build hype for people to get their product, but you also hype up what you're going to do next, is a good way to maintain that hype train. In fact, Tim Lim and Mark Pellegrini have done a great job keeping that exact hype train going for their projects, which they produce for Iconic Comics. They typically have a 60-day funding period, beginning with a 30-day Kickstarter campaign and adding a 30-day Indiegogo with no in-demand period after it to get their initial funding, with which they then do the initial print run and then sell additional copies through the Iconic Comics storefront. Once the crowdfunding is done, they mix updates on how the physical book is going through the production process with hints, teases, and spoilers for their next couple of projects. That's all well and good, but it does lack some of the fun of bigger Kickstarters or Indiegogos that have a bunch of stretch goals, which can radically alter the size and scope of the project and make the audience feel like pushing the crowdfunding higher and higher can revolutionize the project and get them something far beyond what they initially signed up for. None of the Iconic creators do this because it can materially impact their ability to fulfill their campaign on time, undermining the trusting relationship they have built up with their audience. Not to mention the carefully crafted roadmap they have laid out for telling the stories that they want to tell in the time available to them. The differences here are very interesting and very different, I think, from what most people have been presenting them as. Most people are talking about how crowdfunding is not like walking into a store, or how timeliness is not the only value to keep in mind when you are bringing someone a story. And I agree with these things, but I don't think people are looking at it in quite the right way. I think this is largely a question of audience expectation. Some audiences just want to buy into a story. They want to get installments in that story at promised times. They want to consume that story. They want to think about it. They want to enjoy it. And then they want to be ready for the next story when it comes out. This is the storytelling method that has been traditional in comics basically since they came out. They were essentially a magazine-formatted medium, after all. The story is entertainment. Yes, it is an art, and people enjoy it as such, but they want to read it, and they want to enjoy it. And if it's not an instant classic, they are willing to set it aside for the next story until they find the ones that they really like and are really willing to commit to. On the other hand, there are a lot of people out there who want to invest. They want to get in on the ground floor of something big, something impactful, something really cool. So they buy into crowdfunds and they hope to see them spiral beyond the original story they invest in into something big and epic and unbelievably cool. Something like a Sanderson subscription, something beyond the 60 or 80 pages they initially invested in, something that is willing to balloon up to 100 or 150 pages depending on how many side stories or ideas the writer is willing to try and work in. The thrill of seeing what kind of dividends their initial investment pays out is part of the entertainment value of crowdfunding for these people. Now, backers with this investor mindset are probably going to be perfectly happy to buy into campaigns from creators who are not shooting for exactly that kind of campaign, and vice versa. I myself have bought into a couple of campaigns from Art Thibert, who is a little more focused on these investor-style campaigns. Even though a campaign with a lot of special stretch goal, tchotchkes, and whatnot is not really my thing. Sanderson's campaign was also this kind of investment campaign. It had a bunch of stretch goals, a lot of really interesting tiers you could buy into that would get you a lot of stuff beyond just the storytelling part of the campaign, but it also offered opportunities to just buy in for the story. One of the really great things about crowdfunding is that it offers creators a platform that does both. However, at the same time, the flexibility of crowdfunding as a medium makes it very hard for it to pin down an identity. I think that's why we're having the kinds of discussions that we are having right now. People who do a lot of crowdfunding are trying to pin down their identity and how it stacks up against other forms of publishing. Some people just want that traditional publishing experience duplicated through the independent tools that crowdfunding offers. These people have the advantage of having a preset framework of standards and metrics and best practices already pretty well laid out for them by the traditional publishing market. There's nothing wrong with operating inside that framework. At the same time, I think it's possible to provide the benefits of that framework while also leveraging the unique opportunities that crowdfunding offers as a framework. Yes, it is possible to overstep your bounds there. If you're wondering how, I suggest you go and watch some of my videos on the Allegiance Arts and Red Rooster saga. There, I think that the Brightwisers did really overstep their initial mandate from their backers and treated them less like customers or investors and more like stepping stones. But all in all, I think it's important to try new things and try and take fullest advantage of crowdfunding if you want that to be a part of indie publishing going forward. If that's not your cup of tea, that's fine. Shoot for that more traditional publishing route. Offer your audiences regular story installments that they can depend on rather than the opportunity to shoot the moon. That's what I go for primarily as well. But I do understand and respect the desire to roll your dice on something new and perhaps win the jackpot. Yes, it's sometimes unreliable. Investing always is. And I do think people should be a little more wary of investing in a creator who has proven to be a bad investment in the past. But the fact that people can lose their shirt making bad investments doesn't mean the opportunity to make investments should go away altogether. There's a lot of tension between these two poles of indie publishing right now. And I don't think they're going to work themselves out in 1 or 2 videos or even in 1 or 2 weeks. I think people are going to be debating the merits of these things and trying to find the boundaries of these new business models for years to come. And I am here for the ride, but I urge everyone to have a little bit of caution. Crowdfunding is one of the places that is still very much the Wild West of the internet. And while you probably won't drown in a river, contract dysentery, or be killed in a claim jumping, crowdfunding is still not the safest way to get a product. You can easily lose your shirt, or at least $20 of your entertainment budget. When that happens, it's probably a good idea to point out bad investments and just move on. At least that's what I plan to do. If you've got a better idea than that, well, please let me know down in the comments below. Anyway, that's all I got for you today. There's a like button and a subscribe button down there. You can use those as you see fit, and I'll talk to you later.